Hey, changemakers. Thank you for tuning into the Hacking the Patriarchy podcast. I'm your fervent feminist host, Raven O'Neill, and I get the honors of sitting down weekly with diverse experts from all walks of life to explore ideas, opportunities, and strategies that we can all use to hack our way to better lives within patriarchal societies. If you're ready to hack patriarchal systems and structures, I invite you to join us and help move the needle. In today's episode, I get the honor of sitting down with Lindsay Rios, a dynamic revenue and go-to-market leader recognized among the 100 Powerful Women in Sales 2024. A self-proclaimed Rev Ops nerd who's allergic to mediocre culture, she serves as a fractional leader, advisor, and coach while passionately advocating for working women and mothers. Known for challenging conventional wisdom on everything from founder myths to customer journey optimization, Lindsay brings both expertise and authenticity to professional spaces. When not revolutionizing revenue operations, she channels her creativity as an enthusiastic home chef, sharing inspiration through her popular WTF is for dinner posts, all while sporting an ever-changing hair color that keeps everyone guessing. Let's give a warm welcome to Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay. I'm excited to have you here today to talk about all things sales.
Yes, I'm really excited to talk about this topic.
I think it's an imperative topic to talk about in business because it's a big make it or break it. And it's also probably one of the things that scares the hell out of most people. I think a great way to start off to lead into the sales talk is to just get a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. So I'm currently a fractional executive leader, usually focusing on go-to-market and revenue roles in early stage companies, early stage SaaS companies, but sometimes just companies that are at a big inflection point that need a lot of help from someone who's done this enough times and need to get kind of to the next level. But prior to me starting my fractional business a little over a year ago, I had been in early stage startups for a little over a decade. I did AE roles, I did sales manager roles, I led the sales department. So it's been the world I've been in for a long time. And even before that, I sold cars for 5 years, almost too. A lot of selling.
And that is why it makes you the perfect guest, because I think the background in automotive sales really dives into that dynamic that we like to talk about here, which is men versus women. I imagine on a sales floor as a woman, it was very different than being a man on a sales floor.
Yeah, especially then. We don't need to say exactly when to talk about exactly how long ago it was now, but no, that's fine. I mean, yeah, I was the only woman who was a salesperson there for quite some time. And I was also a very young woman amongst a lot of men who were not young. And that was that typical kind of character you would envision in your head if you were going to go buy a car, which was these men, lots of them, mostly. Now, it was a BMW and Mini Cooper dealership, so it was a little bit more fun, and there was a very high standard of the way that we approach things. So, it was better than a lot of dealerships out there. But certainly I knew I was the woman in the room. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. Let's dissect that a little bit, because I want to dive into men and women and how they approach sales different. But I think a great starting point is to talk about what you might have observed as the difference in way you and then the men you worked with approach the sales process.
Yeah. I would say, so there's a couple things. One, when I started there, I was on the Mini Cooper side for quite some years. And this is a very abnormal experience in automotive. We actually really, really liked each other, me and my co-sellers. Automotive selling is known to be very cutthroat and you don't help each other out very much. That wasn't the case. We really liked each other a lot. Start out that way from day one, but it was like there was a guy who immediately kind of took me under his wing and was just kind of like, let me just show you what to do, because there's zero training. Like there's zero, and they literally are just great. Go do this. And my sales manager, he was a good family friend, but he was still busy and working, and that's just how it is. You just go. Now, my dad worked there. That's how I ended up starting to work there. It was supposed to be my break between finishing my undergraduate and going to med school. So I had a bit of a layer of protection, I guess you could say, on inappropriate behavior from men that would be working there. Ironically, it's where I met my husband. There was a lot going on there. I'm very thankful for a lot of faith for that dealership. But even so, like I said, you knew you were the woman in the room. And I remember walking around, feeling a lot of eyeballs on me. And I think that either there was kind of two different approaches or feelings I kind of got from the other men that were selling there. They either thought nothing of me, basically, not thinking that I would even probably be around much or, kind of, okay, that's funny, cute, whatever. They were more like excited about having someone like me there. So it was very like polarizing, I felt like. The only stuff that I would say, fortunately for me, that really would remind me that I was the woman in there / again, being a younger woman, because I had a lot to do with it too, was how many times customers would come up to me asking if they could speak with a salesperson because they assumed I was the receptionist. So that was annoying.
I know that if I were to go buy a car today and there was a woman salesperson, I would much rather deal with her.
Yeah. I can say too, what was really cool is that in the last year plus of me working there were 4 or 5 of us that were selling women. I can't remember what we had a name we came up for ourselves, which was funny. Something to do with, I don't know, it was pretty spicy, but and we were close knit, we took care of each other. And I love that because there's also the reputation of some women out there in sales or performance-based roles where they get even more cutthroat with each other than they would with other men. And that was not the case there. The GM of the dealership was a woman.
Okay. So when you joined, she was already in place? Okay.
Mm-hmm. She'd been there for a while, and she was there for quite a while until she retired after. And, it's really funny. Literally earlier this morning, I was talking about her with someone. I don't talk about her much, but someone asked me what I was doing today. And I said, I get to go on this podcast talking about women in sales and in the workplace. And I was really excited about it. And he's a good friend, and he was just asking me some good questions. And somehow I got brought up because he sees a lot of cutthroat behavior with women where he works. And he asked me, he's like, are you going to talk about that? I said, we'll see. This GM of this dealership, she did really change the way that she operated as she went up in ranks to get to that position. It is so rare for a woman to be a GM in the dealership world, even to this day, but especially then. And she thought, I need to be really aggressive, really cutthroat, just kind of relentless to get to that job and kind of stand her ground in that job. A lot of us who'd been there for a long time, or people who'd been there prior to me too, seeing it happen, we really kind of saw her change. And she was not like that when she had other roles there and stuff. So it was a little bit disappointing for me, to be honest, as a woman, to see that approach versus being able to still be probably how she would rather be more often and more naturally be, and that not be taken seriously enough by other people, which would be more of a understanding, a little bit calmer, a little more patient, a lot less yelling.
That's a whole conversation for another day, because that's an entire other conversation. Right. Actually, we're going to have that conversation on the show with a panel about leadership and women and the different generations too, and how we were raised to think we had to be a specific way.
Yes, that is totally it right there. That's that conversation for sure.
So I'm going to ask a question. I'm not sure I'm allowed to ask, but again, if I were going into a dealership and I would much rather deal with a woman. I have to imagine that when it came, like maybe initially the process wasn't easy, but when it comes to closing the deal, did you close more deals than men did?
It was the number one.
Yeah, because I have to imagine when it comes to like the moment where you have to pull the trigger, it's probably easier to pull that trigger when you feel safe.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is that while it's not okay that this exists, it is the truth still, where, especially when you're buying a car, especially when you're going to do a process where there's very little trust, right? Lots of people do not trust the car selling process, which that's another topic for another day. But once they realized that I was in fact a salesperson and not the receptionist, they were thrilled from the moment. Like the whole thing was great because, I would kind of make a joke and I'm like, well, women certainly would rather buy from women and men usually would rather almost always buy from women. So like either way, I'm good here, of kind of bringing that wall down. But I would love to also say that like, while there wasn't any formal training of like how to sell cars or any of that kind of stuff initially, these brands specifically were very, very fun. And like, I'm a car person. That's the thing. I knew my cars. I knew my stuff. I knew my product. Um, Mini Cooper itself is such a fun, specific brand that it was really more, educational process versus it being a selling process. I think there's a bit of that was helpful. If I had started at a dealership where it was like Toyota or Honda, sorry, no offense, but like you don't get like ridiculously excited about those brands, and the way you might customize your car, things like that. They're good for, I mean, we have a Honda, love it, in that way. But it was not just me being a woman. It was like kind of everything all put together and getting to be in a fun environment and really talk to a lot of people who were kind of nerds about what they were buying too.
Yeah, because you go to get a Mini Cooper if you're looking for a Mini Cooper.
Yeah, you don't accidentally decide, I wasn't thinking about this. I was going to go buy, this Tercel, but here I am.
Yeah. So I know that in sales, there are a lot of things that I would say people would associate with a like weaker sales perspective.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right. But, leading with empathy, having been in the position, what would you recommend for women looking to get into sales or women that are struggling in their business with sales on how to use the challenges to actually make them wins?
So October is like Women in Sales Month. And this last October, I had decided to do a little series on LinkedIn. Once a week, I did a post that was addressing a question that had been submitted. And it was something specific to, women in sales. The question submitted was actually submitted by a man, which was great. And the way he asked it was very cheeky. He goes, why are women better sellers than men? And I was like, that's going to start a riot, but okay. He meant, and it was a little bit of a leading question because he genuinely believes that women are better at selling than men anyways. He went to a certain school that had a lot to do with women's studies and he's, really supportive of women and equality and all that. So I was like, okay. So I knew I had to go do some research. I couldn't just go blatantly say some stuff on LinkedIn. I had to come with receipts, as the younger people say. What I found was that there is a lot of research out there that says that women more often achieve their targets, their quotas, and have some KPIs that would make it seem like they could be better performers. But what was more interesting to me is that we have some intrinsic things about us and the way that our brain operates that actually lend to selling really, really well, that for a long time and even to this day gets seen as, like you kind of said, like the weaknesses. So they tend to be better active listeners, which therefore make you much better at than selling, a consultative solution that is actually needed, or to realize you don't need to be selling to them and sending them on their way, right? Either way. The empathy word that you just said, like our empathy is just naturally kind of a part of how we operate a lot. And again, we as humans like working with people who have empathy for us, who listen to us really, really well. We like feeling heard. And there was also a kind of a notion of like the way that we problem solve as well. Then on the flip side, there were things that men do that can lend them to doing better in sales, or do really well, I should say, not better, but just well. And some of that was more of the like assertiveness, their lack of kind of fear of asking for the business or asking certain questions, right? Amongst a couple other things. So the point of my post was really meant to be like, it's not that I'm saying men or women are better than others, but here are the things that women do naturally that make them really good. And then here's things that men do. And we should probably just learn from each other. What women think, though, a lot of times is this lack of assertiveness is like not going to have them do as well. And that's the part where I would say to any woman, that's absolutely not true. And I think that ties up a little bit back to what we were saying before of like, you don't have to turn into this dragon lady to do well. And in fact, you don't have to be that. Like, there's a wonderful woman out there named Taylor Hatfield on LinkedIn who's been posting a lot about how when she first got into sales and she's more shy and she's not as outgoing and kind of in your face. And she got told a lot, like, you need really good sellers are outgoing and they're this and they're that, you know, and you need to do that. And so she bought it for a little bit. And now she's done really well. And she's trying to encourage other women to, like, you don't have to be like that. You can be the way you are and not do it. So you don't have to be assertive. You don't have to be some crazy direct person. You don't have to be combative, right? And you can be emotional, which is another thing that we get told in a negative way of we're being emotional. But yeah, at the end of the day, when you're going to go and buy something from somebody, what do you actually want to buy from? Someone who's bullying you into buying it, or who actually understood what you needed and then gave you the right options to do so?
Yeah. I would say that like sales is like, even myself, is kind of terrifying. And that's because I don't like hearing no. I really struggle with that. So how might you, like, if you were mentoring a woman, how might you recommend they approach that fear?
Yeah, I mean, we're all so afraid of the no, right? The rejection for sure. I think that one thing that you have to remind yourself, especially when you're selling, and I mean, and for me as owning both of you, and I could relate to this, when we're selling ourselves essentially, right? Because we're not selling on behalf of another company. That can get even harder, right? You have to detach yourself from no being a negative thing. So what I try to coach and always remind sellers or anybody, because this relates to like looking for jobs or stuff like that, right? It's like, no is a good thing. Like, all you want is an answer. So the goal is to get the answer, not a yes, just anything. Because the worst thing ever is when you get nothing, right? And you're just chasing and wondering why you won't respond to me. Why don't you like me? I'm so sad. Well, whatever, move on. But like, the goal is the answer, not what the answer is. And so if it's a no, that's fantastic too. You get to move on with your life, right? Because there's going to be plenty of other opportunities to go after. That's not to say, without getting into this isn't a sales podcast, like there's ways to handle no's and objections and see if it's really a no. But again, you got someone to respond to you at all, should be a win. And as we can work on that for your mindset, that really changes it. Because no one likes to sit in the dark or wonder what's going on. So I think it's really it takes a while for you to feel that way about it, but it's nice. Like, thank you for letting me know and communicating with me.
I see a lot of posts for people that are like, they have proposals out or whatever, and they're like, the worst is a ghost. Like, tell me no so I can move on, but don't ghost me. Because that's the way most people are doing it these days.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can relate it to lots of life things. People were dating and then someone decided to just like stop wanting to date you. Like, that would be the worst thing ever. You just rather them say, I don't think we're a good fit. I would like to not date anymore. Like, you would certainly rather hear that than them ghost you.
Yeah. So I always like to think of the men versus women dynamic. And I feel like when a man hears no, or at least in my experience, when men say no, or when someone answers no, sometimes a man will push it. Like, okay, well, what about this? Or what about that? And kind of just keep going. Do you recommend that for women? And do you have a specific approach that goes with it? Because I'm, for one, like when someone says no, I'm like, okay. And I shut down.
Yeah,
but
okay,
I should probably keep going.
That's a really good point. I think you're right that men are more often just going to keep pushing, while women more often go, okay. So I think that this is another example of learning from each other. I think that it just depends on the type of no you got, And so that's where that like active listening or like really reading what you're being told is a good one. It's funny you say this because just yesterday I was talking with CEO of one of my fractional clients, and we got a response to something that was kind of pushing us off essentially for something. And she was asking for my feedback on like how to approach it. It was basically a version of a no, right, that we got. And it's funny because I gotta wonder if my CEO was a man, would they had even questioned pushing back, and would they ask me for feedback on it? Or would they have just been like, I'm just gonna try this again. I don't like that. No, I'm gonna ask again, you know? So I do think that there's something to that there. But we did talk about it. And we, you know, what we did is we talked about kind of listening to what that person was really saying to us, considering where they might be at, knowing that they really have a lot going on, you know? And so I said, there's two sides to this. This person's trying to say no to us. They can't handle it. They're deprioritizing us because we're not a priority. And I am empathetic to that because I used to not do that very well too. And now I have to be like, if I have one of those days and it's like, if I do everything that's on my calendar, I'm going to lose it and take everyone with me, which we don't want to do. So I'm going to have to choose some people or, you know, a meeting or something to deprioritize. So I'm like, we're being deprioritized. I can respect that. On the other hand, I feel like they might not have enough information and they feel like what we're asking is more of a commitment than it really will be. So we're going to respond with a little bit of both. We're going to give them permission to still tell us no, but we're also going to give them more information to make sure that they understand that what we're asking for, I don't think is as much as they think, you know? And so I think that's basically the approach I would take every time you get like your first no is if you think like, did I not do enough explanation or do they need more clarity potentially before they really say no? Give it another shot, but always give them the permission to say no again in a professional way, you know, so that you don't come off as that like, I'm not listening to you, I'm just going to try again. Because that's what we don't like doing, right?
I'd actually dig in a little more and ask like the evaluation of a no. Like, what is a hard no? Like, oh, don't approach that again. Don't circle back. Don't do anything. Versus that was a no, but it was probably a no, not right now. How do you evaluate what kind of no you've received and where to place them in your sales funnel?
So there's kind of two different ways you can do it. One, if you've had previous conversations with this person or this company, you need to fall back on that discovery process that you'd had before. If you did a really great job and you understood this was a good fit, like you have a major pain that I can solve and you said as much, and now you're telling me no or not right now, then maybe there's something else that you need to help uncover and problem solve. And so that's where you kind of like, that was what I was feeling was happening with this example. I kind of said it was a very like confusing no because it was surprising to us. If you're not surprised by the no, if you kind of knew that they weren't really a great fit from the start or there were some red flags, then whether or not they're asking, like whether or not it's a hard no or not, doesn't really matter. At that point, actually, you probably should just move on. But if you're like cold outreaching to someone and you've got no foundation to go off of, then I can't help but I tell people, like, I just keep approaching people until they tell me to basically jump off a cliff. You know, like, obviously I believe in wonderful, hyper-personalized, you know, outreaches and things like that. I don't do any spamming and AI sequences and things like that. But if I feel with strong conviction after my research that we should at least have a conversation of some sort, then I will just keep trying to do that until you tell me otherwise. Again, I just want the answer. I don't care if it's a no. So I think, like I said, you can just keep trying until someone really tells you no. But if you have any kind of foundation of conversation and discovery, then really evaluating whether this should be a hard no or not really needs to come back on like, this actually confuses me because we already decided that this was worth doing. Or, yeah, this was kind of rocky from the start, so I'm not going to push it more.
Yeah. So you mentioned cold outreach, which I love because there's, you know, the cold outreach and then there's like the relationship building, the networking. I feel, and I always say I feel because I'm making assumptions I shouldn't be making, but I feel like women tend to prefer selling when it comes to that relationship building, the slower, not so heavy on the DM process. And so how do you recommend like approaching that? Should you be doing a mix of it? Should you focus on should you focus on what you're more comfortable with? Should you do the things that you should be doing that you don't want to do because you're not comfortable? If you were advising a woman who is just starting out and just starting to sell her business, how might you advise her approach the sales process?
Yeah, you're not wrong that a lot of women tend to love the kind of account management selling style where you're selling into a book of business, you're selling to people who are already customers, building relationships. That being said, when you are starting out a business or a new sales role, period, you're just going to have to kind of get over it. So that's the thing. I am not a good cold caller. Like, I'm not. I never will be. I mean, I can get better, but it's not my thing. However, I have had many roles where I just had to do it. The thing is that, again, it's all about your mindset. So while I knew I had to do a certain amount of it, especially when I was getting started, knowing my strength lies in my ability to create relationships and referrals and things like that, then I was able to tell myself, this is not something that I have to keep doing forever. Once I can start using my strengths more, this goes away. So the sooner I do this and do this better, the faster I don't have to do it so much, right? I think it's all about kind of the mindset of this is a stepping stone to the next thing that I want to do really, really well. So, an example was when I was an AE at my very first tech job at a startup. Yeah, it was a cold prospecting role. You were a senior AE, but you still had to prospect your eyeballs out. This was also during a time where cold email wasn't really a thing very much. The boom of outreach happened while I was there. So phone calls, especially to the people who were our ICP, our ideal customers, that's what you had to do. And so I would do it. But the moment I started forming any great relationship with that prospect and then soon enough some customers, I just used them to help me now get to other people. Get referrals, build a relationship, maintain the relationship. People talk about it. It became like kind of like farming and sales, and you create this little hub of things and it just grew, right? And so that I'm good at. So you just have to tell yourself it's something that you don't want to do as much. It's scary. And maybe you're not as good at it. Just remind yourself, this is a small part of what I'm going to do to get to the thing that I really, really like doing and that I'm really, really good at. And you'll sharpen that tool a little bit too, because you gotta do it.
It's also a little bit like muscle memory, right? The more you do it, the better you're going to get.
That's the thing. You are going to get better at it, like no matter what. It's just a matter of realizing that it's hard when you're in those moments of like, I can't believe this is what I have to do right now. The amount of founders that I work with too, who never even came from a sales background, and now they find themselves, I'm like, I have to sell, and this is terrifying to me. And I'm like, this is like going to get better. Like, I promise it won't stay this icky forever. And you will look back on this years from now, being like, look what I do just to get get myself going.
Do you recommend that when it comes to selling, you get out of your own way and you hire someone? Or even better, when do you know when it's that time? In my background, when I worked in startups too, there were a lot of times when founders would question, do I need to not be the CEO and hire someone to do it? And usually they were women considering doing that and hiring a man. Again, because of the different sales styles. But going back to how do you evaluate, is it time to get out of my own way?
Yeah, that could be an entire episode, especially if we're talking about the startup world, because there's the like founders will do anything they can often to stop selling and get a salesperson in for obvious reasons. You didn't want to build a company to just, stay a salesperson. There's a few of them out there, but most founders don't actually come from being in a sales background too. The problem with that is, I can't. It'll take too long. But really, as an early stage founder or even a business owner of like a new business you're starting, you have to be the salesperson for a really good period of time until you basically establish that what you offer is needed in your market and you've got some path to being able to continue that. And then you bring in the salesperson. And so, that's pretty generic. It's very dependent on, I'm sure, industry and things like that. But there is that impatience and also that strong desire to be like, as soon as I can stop being the salesperson, like I'm doing it, right? And you really do yourself a disservice by doing that. And so you got to stick with it long enough to get to certain business milestones. But also, you now better understand how your entire go-to-market motion should be working for your business when you've been selling it long enough, and that's another part of the disservice that you're going to have. You won't be able to know how to continue building it and the people who you want to do it with if you don't know that process well enough yourself. That's a hard one to answer, but more often than not, you probably shouldn't do it yet. Like, that's usually what's happening.
Usually you need to do it. You should do the thing that you don't want to do.
You got to do the thing, and you got to do it a little longer than you want. But that's an interesting point you bring up about, I wonder about with like women founders and business owners, if they're more keen to want to hire a salesperson faster than a man would. That would be really interesting research to me.
I don't have that answer, sadly.
Yeah, me neither, but someone out there
does. Hopefully someone's doing the research.
Someone listening, tell us what that is.
I'm going to start wrapping it up in a second, but before I do that, I wanted to dive into authenticity in sales, because I come from a very corporate background, and literally when I started out, dating myself here, but when I started out in corporate, like, they had sales scripts. They were on the phone. They had sales scripts, moved to email. They had email scripts. They have, you have a fleshed out process of, this is the email cadence. It's so scripted. And there's that difference between B2B and B2C in regards to authenticity, but still people buy from people, like you said, which is a perfect point, which then also goes back to why it's hard to hear no, because technically you're selling yourself, like you said. But when it comes to that scripted versus authenticity, which is the best blend? How do you embrace one over the other? I have an easier time with scripted stuff because then I'm not going to make a huge mistake in the process, but that probably isn't the best strategy for myself.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, to this day, still, like, companies are using the scripts and the sequences and stuff because there is a reason, like, there is a best practice to having the template to go off of. When you're brand new, you don't want to wing it most of the time. Like, there are a few percentages of people out there who want to. And even if they want to, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be great. You need to practice what you're going to do when it's new. So I actually strongly love the idea of still having scripts and examples, basically. And especially me, I love a good example. Show me a good example. And then I like to make it be me, sound like me, etc. So I really think it's always going to be a matter of, it never sounds very good when you're just following someone else's thing word for word. If you're brand new, it's okay if you sound robotic and not authentic. You're brand new at what you're doing. You got to start somewhere. Going back to what we said a little bit earlier, like, you will get better and you will get more comfortable. I liken this a lot to when you join a company and you're learning the elevator pitch for what the company offers, right? And so I actually created like an exercise for when people join companies of, you have to practice your elevator pitch because when you're in sales, like, you're going to say it all. But right now you don't know it. So I have a whole thing of like, here's the history, here's why and how it evolved into what they do. And then here's some example elevator pitches. And then here's the one that you're going to literally use word for word when you get on the phone with someone and they're like, tell me what you do in 30 seconds. You'll say it so many times, you'll start making your own version of it. You'll change the words, you'll change the order of a sentence. Like, you'll make it very, very you, and you're authentic. It'll happen pretty soon. And so, I don't want people to shy away from the scripts for fear of not feeling authentic, because also when you totally go off on the fly, it tends to also not work super, super well. I think where it's important to be authentic, though, are places where you don't have to use the script. So like, that's where you can fill in with this person that you're selling to, that not every single thing you do is scripted, and I think a good example of that is like also LinkedIn. It's so different now, but like, you can be very yourself and very authentic and talk about things that have nothing to do with work for a moment. And then if your sellers are on LinkedIn, which so many of ours are, they can see what you're like there too and interact with you there to get get that window of authenticity, amongst the skeleton of what you're working off of that might sound like all the other people down the row.
All right. Well, I love to wrap this show up with 3 hacks that our listeners can it is hacking the patriarchy. So 3 hacks our listeners can walk away with that might help them in regards to the topic du jour. So 3 hacks that a diverse individual could use in business as it relates to sales and getting comfortable and doing the thing.
Doing the thing. Yeah. Hack number 1. This comes to mind because I was having a conversation with a woman in our Women in Sales community. She was worried about asking for too much. And I said, always ask for too much. So hack number 1, always ask for too much. This was specific to some comp plan things, but this could be when you're negotiating, this can be, anything you're doing in your sales process period. As I think women and anyone also who's had a lot of adversity, period, we get too worried about asking too much. Ask too much. Because the worst thing's going to happen is no. Okay, no problem. And then you figure out where you need to be. So that's hack number 1. Hack number 2 is a big mindset thing. We talked a bit about it throughout this. But is if you're doing something that is really challenging, might feel really uncomfortable, like cold calling, for example, or it could even be you're in a role that you don't love. Being an SDR or a BDR is like one of the hardest roles literally out there. But your ultimate goal is you want to be an enterprise. Then you need to remind yourself that your mindset is like, this is literally just a stepping stone. This is my stepping stone to the next big part of what I get to do, which is going to make me really happy. Instead of realizing I just hate the world that I'm in right now, right? Because it really changes how effective you can be in that moment and your mood and like everything about it when you realize like, it's okay that I don't love this part of it because it's literally going to help me. It's like literally just a stepping stone. So that's hack number 2 for your mindset. And then number 3 is go find your tribe. Go find your people that you want to be around, that lift you up, that you are inspired by, and that you have fun with, And so it's, if you're going to be in a performance-based role, it's hard. There's pressure. You work really, really hard and you either do or don't meet your targets. And then the month starts over or the quarter starts over and you're back at 0, right? It's like, it's just kind of never ending. People get burnt out. Like there's a reason for it. So find your people that are going to really keep you going, that you can bounce ideas off of people. And we're all at very different stages in our careers and life, parents or not parents and all this stuff. And yet we have this magical chemistry, being able to always just, someone's like, I need you to help me out here. I need a soundboard. I need a piece of advice. I feel like crap today. I need someone to lift me up, whatever it might be. Like that is going to keep you grounded, going, and it just makes you better, when you have that. So there's communities out there, it doesn't have to, it's hard to find a bunch of people who are like-minded like you. It was kind of an accident and it was amazing, but like find your tribe, because I can't imagine doing anything like this alone.
Excellent. We're going to have a couple episodes following this one in the season that are going to talk about community and different aspects of community. And one is going to talk about the not so common, like where do you go to find these very niche communities? So that'll be good in regards to that last that you gave out.
Big one.
Well, Lindsay, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. When our listeners want to reach out, want to connect, how can they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn. A little over a year ago, couldn't tell you that. I'd have to give you an email address or something. But I got over it when I went fractional. And I'm on there. And you can talk to me about anything you need. Or if you just need your next dinner recipe, half of what I post on there is dinner recipes. So we have one less thing to worry about in our day-to-day.
I will put your LinkedIn in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to today's episode. For all the juicy deets on this episode, be sure to check out our show notes or give us a holler on Instagram at Hacking the Patriarchy Podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support this podcast, don't be shy. Please share it with your friends. Sharing is caring after all. Lastly, if you'd like to lend your personal support, please take a moment to tell the world about it with a review on your favorite streaming platform. We'd be forever grateful. Tune in again soon to enjoy a brand new episode of the Hacking the Patriarchy podcast. And until next time, keep on hacking, my friends.